Good afternoon, Facebook family and friends. Pastor Robert here with our second edition this week of the Parsons study, a twice weekly devotional broadcast on Tuesday and Thursday at noon. I appreciate you joining me here or viewing later on YouTube at the Parson Study channel or Glade Spring Baptist Church channel there. You can go see either of us there and subscribe to us, follow us. Follow us on our church page on Facebook, if you would. And if you would, especially if you're from outside the area, one thing I would appreciate is simply comment in the comments here where you might be watching from. Just the city and state would be fine. But thanks again for joining us today. And today we're going to be in the book of Galatians, the Apostle Paul's letter to the church in Galatia. And in Galatians, we're going to be in chapter 5, just a couple of verses 13 through 15. But I can't imagine a more timely word for our time and culture and world. Some of this I've spoken about before. It just seems to keep popping up in passage after passage that I look at. But Galatians chapter 5, beginning in verse 13. For you were called to freedom, brothers. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For the whole law is fulfilled in one word: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. But if you bite and devour one another, watch out that you are not consumed by one another. So Paul's timely words to the church at Galatia. I don't know if the Apostle Paul ever envisioned a nation called America, but certainly he could be speaking to us as Americans in this passage, that you were called to freedom. And certainly freedom has long been a hallmark of our nation, indeed of its founding, one of its founding principles. It was written even into our own Declaration of Independence that freedom, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness were inalienable rights guaranteed to all men. Inalienable, could not be taken away from us. We could not be alienated from them. So that we have this individual right to freedom. But whether or not Paul ever imagined an America, who he was writing to was the church, to the believers assembled in Galatia, to the church in Galatia, specifically to his brothers and sisters in Christ. You were called to freedom. But when we read that, when we hear that, we need to ask the question, freedom from what? And freedom for what? Freedom from what and freedom to do what? What were we free from? And what are we now free to do? That's what Paul was addressing. He goes on to say, only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh. In other words, Paul is saying, don't just use your newfound freedom for yourselves, for indulging yourselves, for pursuing your own selfish interest or doing whatever it is you want to do just to please yourself. But through love, use that freedom to serve one another. And see, the situation that Paul was writing to address in the church, there were those that still believed they had to adhere to the Jewish law, the law that started with the 10 Commandments given by God to Moses on Mount Sinai, that God later added more laws to, and then mankind added even more laws to. Paul was saying, no. What Christ has called you to is something new. What Christ has called you to is freedom. So you need to stop focusing on just doing the law and start worrying about fulfilling the law. In other words, you need to quit focusing on the what of everything that you're doing and start focusing on the why, the reason that you're doing it. As most of you know, years ago I worked in law enforcement, and one of the things often talked about in legal circles is the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law. Fulfilling every little checklist item versus what was the spirit of the law intended to accomplish. And that's exactly what Paul is talking about here. Quit worrying about checking all the boxes and start worrying about why you're doing what you do. Quit worrying about checking all the boxes to fulfill the law, because the entire thing, the entire law can be fulfilled in one principle. You can fulfill all the law in this one principle. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And what Paul is talking about is not just some warm and fuzzy feeling that we might have. Oh yeah, I love everybody. I love the whole world. Just in love with humanity. What Paul was talking about was concrete. What things are you doing? What things can you do practically, specifically, to help those that life has brought us in contact with, that God has brought into our circle of existence or circle of influence? What can you do to help your neighbor? And this isn't just referring to the neighbors we like. This is referring to people we're in touch with, whether they're our friends or especially if they're our enemies. People that we agree with, and especially those that we do not agree with. People that we like, and especially people that we do not like. But you know, from what I see and read and hear, we are failing in achieving that, even in the church, especially in the church. We are failing in our endeavor to love one another, and where I see this especially is on social media, and I see it especially from Christians, and what I see troubles me. If you don't vote this way, or you don't support that policy or that candidate or that politician, or you don't behave some other way, you're an idiot. If you don't believe like I do, there must be something wrong with you. And I think in times like this, we need to be reminded not just of Paul's words, but this same thought and this same principle is throughout the Bible. In Ephesians 4:29 we read, "Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear." So we need to ask before we say it or before we type it into social media, is this something good? Is this going to uplift people and build people up, or is this just going to corrupt and further tear down? In Titus 3 verse 2, "Speak evil of no one, to avoid quarreling, to be gentle, and to show perfect courtesy toward all people." To speak evil of no one. That doesn't give us license to speak evil of our enemies or those that disagree with us. It says speak evil of no one. Then finally in James 1 verse 26, "If anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless." Finally, Paul's words come with a warning. "But if you bite and devour one another, watch out that you are not consumed by one another." Freedom cannot long exist if we do not also have the compelling need to love and serve one another. Without that call to freedom, a floodgate can open which sweeps away every foundation. So again, thanks for being a part of the Parsons study this afternoon. And again, if you would, leave me a comment as to where you are watching from. I hope you have a blessed rest of the week, and we will look for you on Sunday, if not in church, here on Facebook Live, and again next Tuesday at noon for the Parsons study. So God bless and thanks for watching.